So we started off last week thinking about transformative change, and I'm going to be quite brief because I'm going to try and summarize what happened in a week, but you're hearing a lot of the things again, so I'm going to skip through it pretty fast. And one of the things we started with was, what are the elements of a systemic change, which Margarita's already referred to. There's no silver bullets out there. It's going to be a comprehensive approach to transformation. And thank God this is on the up there after Ismail's really strong presentation. So crucial is strong farmer voice in the change process. Ismail also mentioned this, the digital platforms that are going to be necessary in the coming generation. We've heard about technologies this morning, but once again, it's one piece of the pie. Absolutely crucial, mentioned by various speakers already this morning, the whole policy environment. So what is the agricultural advantage? Essentially, we're trying to make the case that agriculture is really important in the whole climate change debate, and it has to move forward. I was on an event at Subster in June, where actually when they sent me an invitation to come, it was just an invitation to participate. It was innovation and climate change. And it was all about wind energy, industry, etc. And there was no agriculture. And so I wrote back to them and said, surely there's innovation in agriculture and surely it's important. And so that's the state of it, is that agriculture does have to get on the agenda. We've seen this already. So one of the events this week was the land and water advantage. Great examples about solar water pumps, South-South learning from the scaling up that's happening in India, and surely this can happen in Africa as well. Drought, heat, pest-tolerant varieties that can be produced now with the modern techniques in 4 years, as opposed to decades in the previous generation of scientific research. And also on the social side, a whole lot of discussion about land rights and water rights. If there's going to be a transformation in agriculture, it's also taking a gender transformative approach. A really strong case was made for how focusing on women can have many co-benefits other than the pure agricultural benefits. The feminization that's already happening in many countries, so how can we get behind that feminization? And just getting much more participation with women is going to help drive the transformation. In the program that I lead, we actually have budget allocations that have to be spent on the gender side, because we've realized that in the past it's just been insufficient attention. So then, yeah. So the next event was on low emissions, the low emissions advantage. So this is another point that you already made. Only 2.5% of public finance getting through to agriculture. There was lots of interesting discussion about how this is moving forward, the NAMAs. There's a climate smart lending platform, the eco-business fund. So there's a lot of activity around here. And I think some of the breakthroughs in agricultural transformation are actually going to happen when we do more research in this area and more action in this area than in the more traditional agricultural research. So it's increasing, but at small scales. And this was particularly focused on low emissions options, but it doesn't come with trade-offs. There can be long-term agricultural productivity gains, can be incomes for farmers, and many of the low emissions options are also building resilience. Okay, let's hope this goes. Yes. The policy advantage, there was a section on policy. And there was quite a lot of discussion about science policy interfaces and how to move policy forward. And I think one of the things that came forward was let's not only think about the policy, but also about the implementation of the policy. So these should almost be science, policy, implementation of policies. The other thing is from the scales, in terms of working right from community to global scales along the full spectrum, getting the policies right across the scales, and also across the sectors. And I think other people this morning made this issue about making sure we work with the different sectors. So, for example, the solar irrigation in India, the farmers are selling excess electricity into the national grid, those kinds of issues. And the agricultural policy, actually making the transformation in terms of agriculture, may be driven by reforms in the financial system, in the insurance sector system, so that the kinds of policies that we must be thinking of is much broader than the agricultural policies. The breeding advantage, 60% of bean growing areas could become unsuitable this century because of the 2-degree warmer climate. So we're aiming for only a 2-degree warmer climate, and that's going to be troublesome for some crops, and particularly crops like beans. So crop breeding is crucial, and the point made that actually the genetic resources, the gene banks of the world are really important to maintain for future breeding efforts. The business advantage, this was a point from Tony yesterday. For every $1 of ODA, there's $24 in domestic finance. How do we leverage the ODA to drive a transformative agenda? The importance of public-private partnerships and the whole area of blended finance. So some of the priorities that came out, and there's many, and we will, from each of the events, there will be a website where you can see some of the priorities, but just some of a few of them, taking this gender transformative approach, the strong farmer organizations, in many sessions, the importance of digital agriculture, the working across the sectors, the banking sector, the agricultural sector, the energy sector, the technologies, increased investment in climate actions in agriculture. How do we make sure that agriculture is on the agenda of these innovation events, for example? The business case for long-term adaptation. So how do we, it's pretty boring perhaps, to keep gene banks, and how do we finance gene banks? How do we keep the genetic resources around? And I think this one was really made yesterday, the importance of the private sector in driving transformative approaches. So the fantastic thing that happened yesterday was that there was a decision on agriculture. And if anybody's been, I've been following the negotiations since 2009, and it's a very boring process. And 6 years they've been discussing in Substa, and this is what they got to yesterday. So, you know, it's a fantastic outcome that finally in the official forums there's going to be discussions. But I would also say that what's happening in the bond zone is fantastic in terms of agriculture. So we must really continue the discussions outside the forum as well. And just to say, this is, we're working with the UNFCCC, and this is the kind of thing that's happening in the outside, working with the national adaptation planning process, the kinds of options available. Many of you working with the GCF, agriculture's on the agenda, so the things are happening outside the negotiations, and I think if we want to push the negotiators, we must do more work outside and really keep agriculture on the agenda. Thanks very much.